4 months went by. In the middle of the night, we are awakened by the capos with whistles and hitting us, out, everybody out, and line up. And in the confusion, my brother did not line up with me in the same 5. He lined up like 2 away from me and another 5. Suddenly an SS officer came and he started to count 1, 2, 3, and he came to my row above face, and they took us from there to the train station, and that was the last time I saw my brother Joseph.
You were luckily in the right row.
Yeah.
Just by luck.
Just by luck. Now, later on I found out what happened to him. When I was in Buchenwald, after the liberation, I met a boy from my hometown who was with us together in Plaszow. His name was Mendy. And I saw him, and I said, Mendy, do you know what happened to my brother Yosef? And he says, yes. He says, in December of 1944, he was very sick. He was taken to the infirmary, to the Revere, and he never came out. Now, it's a known fact that anybody that went into the infirmary never came out. It's unbelievable. Usually, in a normal world, when a sick person goes into a hospital or an infirmary, they help him. Here, they injected into their heart gasoline, and that's how they killed him. Meanwhile, we are on the train. We don't know where we are going. Again, the same thing, pushed in all the people. And suddenly the train stopped. And there's yelling and screaming. We hear the guards are screaming. And we heard an explosion. It seems that the partisans did something to the rails, and the train couldn't move. We were going to go to Czechoslovakia to some kind of a concentration camp there to work there. Instead, the train went back, and they took us to Gross-Rosen. That's in Silesia, between Poland and Germany. Now, Gross-Rosen was a regional camp. There were satellite camps all around it. There was a lot of industry there. There were AG Farm, and there was Bayer, and there were all kinds of factories that worked for the war effort. And they got slave labor. They used to pay 6.5 marks a day for every prisoner, these industries. And we arrived in Gross-Rosen, and Gross-Rosen was a terrible camp because it was a transit camp. And you couldn't walk. You had to do everything on the double. Otherwise, you were beaten up. And a few days later, we were taken with trucks to a camp nearby called Buchenwald. It was a small camp. There were 10,000 people on a mountain. And wintertime was cold terribly because the wind was blowing there. It was terrible. And from that camp, I walked every day to a factory in Breslau, which was nearby the city of Breslau, and worked in an airplane factory making parts for the Luftwaffe. And that's where I worked for 4 months.
It was cold?
Very cold, because the clothing that we got in Auschwitz, the thin pajamas, was the same wintertime and summertime.
Are you still wearing the same clothes?
Same clothes. They used to take us into a barrack, told us to take it off, and they used to disinfect it. Used to put it in big drying machines to kill the lice.
How do you survive the cold?
Many people didn't. My toes were frozen after the death march. But luckily enough, I got good medical care after the war, and they came back. We are in Buchenwald. It's a terrible camp. People were dying all the time. People gave up. They used to run over to the barbed wire to be electrified. And also at night, people were trying to go out, even just to go to the latrine. If the guards saw somebody coming out, they shot them, because you weren't supposed to leave the barrack. You were supposed to go in the barrack. I must tell you this story. It's a very sad story. There was a rabbi there, Rabbi Yitzchak from Hungary. He was a wonderful man. He was in his early 50s. He was constantly encouraging us to have faith that we will survive this. Even the non-religious Jews he used to talk to constantly. And people liked him very much. Once when we were standing at the roll call, the commandant came in, was a ferocious Nazi. And this rabbi, this time, was standing in the front row, and he knew that he was a rabbi. He went over to him and he says, Herr Rabbiner, Rabbi Sir, where is your God? And he motioned to heaven. God is in heaven. And he started to laugh sarcastically, and he started to yell, I am your God. I can do with you whatever I want. And he threw him down to the ground, and with his shiny boots started to step on him and kick him until he stopped moving. And then he ordered some prisoners to take him away. A few hours later, he died. That night, when we came back from work, everybody was talking about this. And a discussion started about where was God. And this discussion went on for weeks, every night when we came back. And I, as a 15-year-old boy, was sitting on top of this wooden compartment, listening very carefully, because I was bewildered. Now, he was very friendly to me. Every Saturday, he used to come over to me in the factory where I worked. And he used to say, he called me an endearing name, Moshe, he called me. He said, Moshe, you know what is today? I said, yes, Rabbi, I know it's Shabbat. He says, let's pray. And I used to pray with him because I knew the prayers by heart. And I became very close to him. And he really injected in me a certain faith that I will survive.
Did you love him?
Yes, very much.
So how do you feel when they virtually kill him?
What can I tell you? They killed my parents. They killed brothers, sisters. Nothing you can say.
Were there tears then for him?
Yes.
And when you overheard the discussion, where is God, what were people saying?
They were quoting, they were some very learned people. They were quoting from the Bible, from the Talmud, from the Midrashim, and they brought examples of what happened. They were talking about Job, and they were talking about Abraham, that Abraham questioned God, why doesn't he do justice, or Moshe, and others. And some was bringing this as an example, that we don't know God's ways and how he conducts the world. And there were others that said that God doesn't care.
You wrote a wonderful book entitled Not to Forget, Impossible to Forgive.
Right.
It is a beautifully written book, very easy read, and there's a chapter in this book where you ask that question. You talk about Jewish theology.
Yeah.
Moshe, how have you answered that question for yourself? Where was God?
I don't have an answer. I have searched all kinds of sources, and until this day, I don't have an answer. There are people that give all kinds of answers, which some make sense and some don't. Some people say that this was our punishment because we did not leave Europe and go to Israel, for instance. But is there can anybody say that 1.5 million Jewish children had to be sacrificed in order to get the Jews to go to Israel? It's a very difficult subject.
Were you angry at God?
There were times I was angry, yes. And I questioned, especially during the Death March, when I saw what they were doing. In January of 1945, they got an order to evacuate Buchenwald because the Russian soldiers are coming closer. So in the morning, the entire camp lined up in a column, and the SS men and the Wachmann, by the way, those Wachmann were volunteers from all over Europe, Lithuanians, Poles, Ukrainians, Estonians, even Muslims from the Balkans. And they were helping out the SS. And they were marching all the time. They had orders that if anybody just stepped out of the line, he was shot. And all the stragglers were shot because they couldn't keep up with the pace of the march. And people were afraid to stand in the line on the side. Now, there was a very interesting thing that happened. The Wachmann gave their backpack to the prisoners to carry it for them. And one of the prisoners opened up the pack, and he saw there was food in there. So he ate as much as he could, and he gave to the other people. And then he threw away the backpack. The snow was coming down, something terrible. And he was looking for the prisoner. And he couldn't find him because all of us looked the same. We all wore the same clothing. We were all emaciated. The snow covered us. So he went over to the commandant and told him what happened. They stopped the column. And the commandant said, whoever took the backpack, come forth right away. Nobody moved. Again, nobody moved. Finally, he says, if within 2 minutes the prisoner who took it doesn't come forward, we are going to shoot every 10th prisoner. The 2 minutes were up. They started to count every 10th prisoner. They lined them up. And just before they were going to start shooting, a prisoner came forward and said, I was the one who did it. The commandant took out his pistol, shot him, and threw him to the side of the road. Now, we are not sure that it was really the person who did it, or somebody volunteered, sacrificed himself in order to save so many Jews. That was the kind of dilemmas that people had. So when I saw these things, I also said, I wish I would die. But then a moment later I said, I will not give them the pleasure that I must survive at least somebody from my family.
It's cold,
Very cold,
snowing,
snowing,
no food.
no food.
If you stop, if you lag, you're shot.
Right.
How do people survive that?
We ate snow. Used to take the snow and eat it. At night, we did not march. They put us in barns in the villages that we crossed. They put us in schools, and they guarded us around. Now, and also there we were very crowded. And the fact that we were so crowded like sardines helped us to survive because the bodies were warming one another.
Did you have food then?
Once in a while, we're given some bread.
How many days?
5 weeks.
You marched for 5 weeks.
5 weeks. Until we arrived in Buchenwald.
I ask you again, how do human beings survive?
Well, let me tell you, out of the 10,000 prisoners, only 400 survived.
Only 400.
400 survived. The others were either died from hunger, from starvation, from fatigue, or they were shot. Only 400 of us survived.
Do you know why you were one of the 400?
No, I still say that maybe it was my ancestors intervened.
After 5 weeks, where do you end up?
I end up in Buchenwald.
And how would you describe Buchenwald? How would you compare Buchenwald to Auschwitz?
It was a different kind of a camp. Buchenwald was originally a political prisoners' camp. They were there prisoners for many years. Communists, socialists, all kinds. There was even a barrack there of VIPs. Leon Blum was there. You know who else was there? LaGuardia's sister. She was half Jewish, and they brought her there. So it was a different kind of a camp. The camp was divided into various sections. And I was in the Kleinem Lager, in the smaller camp, in Barrack 66, which was the children's barrack. These were teenagers that brought there from all the different remaining camps. And the Blockältester, the chief of the barrack, was a Czech citizen, not a Jew. He was a public school principal in Czechoslovakia. Was brought to Buchenwald because he was anti-German. He was a wonderful man. We even made sure that he became a Chassidu Mot HaOlam because he did wonderful things. He couldn't do much, but whatever he could, he did. He made sure that the children don't go to work in the heavy kind of work, like in the quarries and other heavy stuff.
In Buchenwald, you were with a number of people who made a major contribution to Jewish life.
Yes. Elie Wiesel, Rabbi Lau.
Did you know them?
I saw them there, yes. I mean, there was not enough time to socialize because they kept you busy all the time. But I knew about them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So you were in Buchenwald for how long?
I was in Buchenwald from February until April 11th.
Roughly 2 months.
Yeah. And in Buchenwald, I was sent to clean the houses of the SS families. Every morning, I had to report to the gate, and an SS man took me to the house of the colonel that I had to clean. Had to wipe the windows, wash the floors, shine the shoes and the boots, clean the snow, do all kinds of this. And I learned German, I understood. And the wife was a ferocious Nazi herself. And I overheard her once making a remark saying, "When are you going to get rid of these dirty Jews?" I mean, I come and I clean her house, and here I'm dirty. There were all kinds of rumors before the liberation. A few days before the liberation, they stopped giving even the rationing that they gave before. The High Command gave an order to the Buchenwald Command to annihilate the entire camp because the Americans were coming closer. So they started to empty out the camp. Barrack by barrack, they took to the gate, and from the gate into the forest. In the forest, there were trucks with SS with machine guns. And every time a barrack arrived, they were just cutting down the prisoners. This went on for 4 days. 60,000 prisoners were massacred during those 4 days. Then came our turn, the children's barrack. The SS came to the barrack. They lined up in 2 lines. They made like a cordon. And we had to march in between. The Blockheltester, the chief of the barrack, was marching ahead of us. And we are walking towards the gate. I was very weak. I was, with all my strength, I was pulling myself. And just before we reached the gate, the sirens started to wail. And the Germans closed the gates, and the chief of the barrack ordered us to run back into the barrack. I couldn't run anymore. I was crawling on my stomach. That's how sick I was. I finally reached the barrack. Then American airplanes arrived in the skies, and they started to bomb all around the camp. Not the camp itself, but all around it. And this went on for hours until late at night. During the night, it was quiet. We didn't know what was happening. And in the morning, it's quiet. We saw a few prisoners running with white flags. And then 2 American tanks broke through the gate and a jeep in the back of them. And they went into the barracks. Among them was Rabbi Herschel Schachter, the chaplain from Yeshiva University. He came into our barrack, and he said in Yiddish, "Jiddische Kinder, ihr seid frei. Jewish children, you are free."
Remember that moment?
Oh, sure, I remember.
Where were you?
I was in the barrack, lying on the wooden thing because I was very sick.
And in Schachter comes and says you're free.
Yeah. And some of the prisoners went over to the American soldiers. They were hugging them, they were kissing them, and they told them, "Where were you? We waited for you so long," and all that. And then the Americans started to try to save whoever they could. And they took me into a makeshift hospital, which was made from the SS barracks, and they started to treat me.
With what?
With medicine. Also, they gave me just teaspoons of cereal because we were not allowed to eat regular food because many thousands of people died after.
By eating?
By eating. And for 2 weeks, I was hovering between life and death. And little by little, I came back to myself.
Was it hard to believe or easy to believe that the Americans were there and it was over?
No, it wasn't hard. Once we saw the Americans, we knew that we have nothing to be afraid of, and that the Americans are decent people, and I'm thankful to them until this day.
Did you cry then?
Yes, I did. Actually, the day of liberation at Buchenwald was my happiest day and my saddest day. The happiest day that I knew that I'm free, but the saddest day because I didn't know what happened to my family and I didn't know where to go or what to do. I was 16 years old. I was a youngster, alone, without any documents, without anything, and I didn't know what to do.
What did you do?
Well, for the 2 months I was in the hospital. I didn't know what to do. But then a group of Jews came from France, and they decided to take the children of Buchenwald to France for recuperation, to Écouilly. That's a place in southern France. And they took us, and they were wonderful. They treated us medically and good food and good housing, and we studied. And a couple of weeks later, 3 soldiers from the Jewish brigade came to visit, and they told us about Eretz Israel, about the kibbutzim and the moshavim, and that Israel is going to declare a state and all that, and who wants to go to Palestine. Out of the 500 that we were there, 350 signed up, and I was among them. And they told us that one night they're going to come and take us, but this will be an illegal immigration because the British doesn't allow anybody to come in. And sure enough, a few weeks later, the Jewish brigade came in British trucks, and they loaded us on these trucks and took us to a small French port where a freight ship was waiting for us. And there they loaded us, and there were already some teenagers from other camps. And they renamed the ship Yaldei Buchenwald, the children of Buchenwald. And we sailed to Italy, and there they added more. And we ended up having 1,100 teenagers. And we sailed on the Mediterranean. During the day, we were not allowed to go on the deck because the British had reconnaissance planes and all that. And the food was rationed, water was rationed because they didn't know how long the voyage will take. And at night, we used to go up on the deck for fresh air. On the 10th day, from a distance, we saw the Carmel Mountains. The joy was something unusual. It cannot be described. But soon after that, 4 British Navy ships surrounded our ship, and they announced that we are trying to get into Palestine illegally, follow us. They took us to Haifa. Forcefully, they took us out from the ship, and they took us on trucks to Atlit prison camp. Remember I said that my brother, one of my brothers, was a Zionist.
Yes.
He went to Palestine in 1937. He arrived in Palestine, and he went to the Hebrew University.
What was his name?
His name was Shmuel Tzvi. He was a very smart man. And while things were normal, he used to write letters home almost every week, and used to describe the country, every place. And I used to swallow it, because from the Chumash and what he told me, I put 2 and 2 together. And then, of course, when the war started, no mail was coming anymore. And we didn't know what happened to him, but we knew that he was in Palestine. So when I arrived in Atlit, the Jewish agency had permission to go in, and they made a list of all the people that came. There was a program for looking for relatives on the radio. And that night, they announced who arrived, and my name was mentioned on the radio. And a landsman of mine heard it. He ran over to my brother, told him, your brother, Moshe, arrived and he is an athlete. My brother wouldn't believe it because I was 8 years old when he left. A baby like me will survive. It's impossible. But he came the next day to Atlit with this landsman, and they were standing at the gate. And they saw somebody walking, because they couldn't get in. Saw somebody walking there, they called them over, and they said, please go and look for Moshe Lipschitz, because then my name was still Lipschitz. And somebody comes into the barrack, and he says, who is Moshe Lipschitz? And I said, I am. He says, your brother is waiting for you at the gate. Can you imagine? I ran to the gate. I recognized him right away because he was older than me even then. And he used to send pictures also. He did not recognize me because I changed completely. And he started to ask me questions. The name of our parents, the name of our brothers and sisters, the neighbors, what my father did and this and that, because he just couldn't believe it. Finally, he realized that it's me. And we were crying joyfully, and also sadly that I was telling him what happened to the rest of the family.
Are you the only one who survives?
No.
Who else survives?
Another brother, Shlomo, who was in a labor camp, a Hungarian labor camp, and 3 of my sisters that came to Auschwitz.
They survived?
They survived.
Your mother did not?
No. And the 2 married sisters did not survive either with the children.
Their children also did not survive. No. You were rescued from Atlit by the Haganah, yes?
Right.
That's a story in and of itself.
Right.
Do you ultimately reunite with your brother and live with him in any way?
My brother, unfortunately, sadly, died very young. He was 39 years old when he died. He took to heart the thing that what happened during the war. And so he died.
It broke his heart.
It broke his heart. But he established a family, and he had 5 children, and they are doing well.
You survive Atlit.
Yes.
You're rescued by the Haganah. You join the Haganah.
Right.
You fight in the War of Independence.
Right.
You're there even, you come back in 56 during the Sinai campaign.
Right.
What's your personal feeling for the state of Israel?
My personal feeling is tremendous feeling. When I had to remain here because I got married, it was a big problem for me. It was a big problem. But I took solace in the fact that I worked for the Jewish Agency in education, and I was involved in sending youth from here to Israel, preparing plans, sending teachers to Israel, also visiting Israel very often. And until this day, we spend half of the year there. We have a place in Yerushalayim, and Libi b'Mizrach. My heart is there all the time, and especially we have a daughter living there with 4 grandchildren. They all 4 served in the army, and so.
Again, Jewish transcendence, yes?
Yes, yes.
Do you have anger to the capos or to the Jews in the camps who, to save themselves, in essence became part of the brutality?
I wrote about that, about the Judenrat and about the capos and all that. Again, there were different kinds. There were Jews that really did it in order to try to save as much as possible. But then there were those that took advantage and wanted to save themselves. And those were the problem. Those were the problem.
Are you angry at them?
Yes, I am.
Are you angry at FDR, at Franklin Roosevelt?
Yes, I am.
Tell me why.
I am angry because here, in the St. Louis, a ship of over 900 people who begged to come in temporarily, and he wouldn't do anything. And then they were sent back, and most of them were killed in the concentration camps. I mean, you have to have some human decency, some feelings for people, and especially a great man like him should have understood. So there must have been something in his character that didn't allow him to do it.
Do you feel the State Department was also complicit here?
Definitely, because they wouldn't allow Jews to come in. They wouldn't allow the army to go and bomb the rails. I met a Jewish airman, a captain, who was in the Second World War, who volunteered. And he flew over to Germany many times, and he volunteered to go to bomb Auschwitz, but they wouldn't let him. We saw the planes flying over Auschwitz when they went to bomb the oil fields near Auschwitz and the rubber factories there.
Was it anti-Semitism?
Yes.
That simple.
Yes.
Are you angry at the German people? Did they know? Were they complicit? Or was it only the Nazi?
I would say that 95% of them were complicit.
Moshe, you see people who today deny the Holocaust,
Right.
deny the Shoah. What do you think and feel when you hear that?
Sometimes I laugh, and sometimes I'm very angry, because the Germans themselves admit that there was such a thing. And let them go to the concentration camps and see what happened there, and let them read the memoirs of the survivors. I mean, how can they say that there was no such thing? I know that Abbas wrote a book, his doctoral thesis, that only 300,000 Jews died from sickness, not annihilated. There are such people. So we have to counteract. We have to tell the truth. And when I speak to students in the schools, they tell me, now we heard the truth. Now we know what happened there, because from books we could not understand this. Let me tell you something. There is a German private school in White Plains. I was called by the Holocaust Center in Westchester that they want me to go to this private school to speak to the German students about the Holocaust. And I was hesitating because I didn't feel comfortable, and also I didn't know how they will accept what I have to say. 2 days later, the principal of the school calls me and he says, I understand that you are hesitating to come. Please come, because we want to hear it the way it is. So I decided to go. I came there. It was a very cold reception. When I go to public schools or any other non-Jewish schools, the reception is wonderful. They don't know what to do with me. Here, everybody was very cold. I spoke for an hour, and I told them my experiences. And then I said, are there any questions? The boys did not ask one question. The girls did. The first girl gets up and she says, do you think that the Jewish people can forgive the German people of what we did to them? I said to her, frankly, I cannot forgive of what they did to my family, and I cannot speak for the 6 million Jews who perished. If they would be alive, they would speak for themselves. The only one that can forgive is God, and we don't know God's ways or when He is going to punish those who committed these atrocities. Another girl gets up and she says, do you think there can be another Holocaust? I said, I hope not. But at the same time, we know what happened in Darfur and in other places. Although you cannot compare the two, the Jewish Holocaust is something unique. And then you must have heard that Iran wants to throw an atomic bomb on Israel. God forbid, if that happens, that would be another Holocaust. However, there's one big, big difference. Now we have our own country, a glorious army, and this time we will fight. So that's...
Was there a third question?
Oh, there were other questions. I'll tell you, I received so many letters. Then I got a letter from the principal 2 weeks later telling me that the students are still discussing at home with the parents of what I had to say. Now, that is my aim. I want the students to discuss it at home, not just hearing it and that's it. And that's very important.
When I've talked to other survivors, so often a theme that emerges is, why me? How did I survive? And so many people I loved did not. And Moshe, there's even at times a sense of guilt. I survived,
Right.
and people I loved did not.
I have the same feeling. Many times I ask myself, why did I deserve to survive? And I ask myself, why? And I try to rationalize, and I say to myself, maybe because I was destined to try to tell the world what happened. Because I made it my mission to speak about the Holocaust to whomever I can and write about it so our people know, and also that they don't forget, and that they are careful that a thing like this will never happen again.
If it happens again, does that make the telling any worth less? My own feeling is that your story is a story that must be told. Whether it happens again or not is secondary. I hope it never happens again, because humanity should never permit it to happen again. But if a Messiah came and said to me, you don't have to worry, it'll never happen again, I still want your story told. Not because it's going to change anything. Your story is my story. It is a story of my family, of my people. It's a story that should be told and retold and never forgotten, because it was my family's tragedy. And I want to hear the story. And I want everyone watching to hear the story, because it's our story. I don't need a reason beyond that. When I go to a Yom HaShoah commemoration, it's not so it won't happen again.
Yeah.
It's because, Moshe, I couldn't help you. I couldn't help your father. I couldn't help your mother. I couldn't help your siblings whom you lost. I couldn't do more. I will not do less than make sure your story is heard. And I don't mean to be presumptuous, so you can say to me you're not comfortable with what I'm about to say.
It's all right.
I don't believe that anyone who did not survive was any less worthy than you.
Of course.
Their zchut was no less.
Yeah.
The merit of their family was no less. There's a certain degree of chance, of luck, of physical biology, which permitted you to survive, and I believe there was will as well. But I believe there were people with just as much will, just as wonderful a family, just as much strength. It just wasn't to be. And I am so grateful. And so, again, in some way this is presumptuous. I'm so happy you were one who survived because you're committed to telling the story. Not everyone is able to do that.
I know.
You write eloquently and you're not afraid to speak. So you give a gift back. But it's not because you're better than anybody who didn't survive. It's because you were in the right place at the right time and you had a strength, and good for you. And when I hear your story, you understand. It makes me a better Jew. It makes everyone who hears you a better human being. Was there love in the camp?
Yes. Well, if I take an example of like this rabbi, he would do anything to help a Jew. And his encouragement and the way he talked to people, you could see that he was loving Jews.
Did the camp in some way extinguish humanity?
Yes. Yes. They dehumanized you. They tried to. And that's why those Jews that were able to save their upbringing, they were brought up. Like, for instance, many times when I felt very low, I was reminiscing from home about our Shabbat and about the holidays, of how it was, the singing and the food, and in the synagogue, because my father was a cantor, and the 6 brothers, we were a choir, his choir. We were helping him. And that gave me encouragement, that showed me how different we are, how the Jewish people, how spiritual we are. And that also gave me strength to survive. You know, there is a saying in Yiddish that a person is stronger than iron and weaker than a fly. That's how I felt many times. Stronger than iron, but weaker than a fly sometimes.
Do you hear in your ear the melodies of your home on Shabbat?
Do I hear? I recorded a few things of them, and I myself became a chazan. For 40 years, I was a chazan.
Where?
In Boston, in Hartford, and in New York, and in Leonia, New Jersey.
So do a few bars, anything you want, of a melody that comes from your childhood.
My voice is not what it was.
It doesn't matter.
Ya Ribon Olam, Bi'omaya, Antu Malka Melech Malchaya, Shefar Kedamach Leharvaya, and so on.
That's lovely.
That, by the way, was a melody that my father composed.
Really?
And we sang it every Friday night. And
It's a classic text.
Yes.
But he put a new melody to
Yes.
it.
And I still sing it, and my grandchildren sing it.
Okay. You do, post-Shoah, create a life for yourself.
Oh, yes.
You marry.
I'm married very happily. We are married 59 years.
Mazal tov. Who did you marry?
Her name is Hannah Hirschman. She's a wonderful woman, a wonderful mother, and a wonderful grandmother. And she was a teacher at Solomon Schechter for many years.
So how many children and how many grandchildren?
We have 3 daughters, all married happily, and we have 11 grandchildren, which is symbolic. We were 11 brothers and sisters, and now we have 11 grandchildren.
Isn't that marvelous?
And one other thing I want to tell you. One of my granddaughters got married 2 years ago. And in the middle of the wedding, one of the and all the grandchildren were there, even from Israel, because I have a daughter that lives in Israel. One of the grandchildren comes over and he says, Saba, come, we need you. And they took me into the dance floor. They sat me down on a chair, and all 11 marched in with T-shirts that said on the T-shirt, Yaldei Hanisim, miracle children.
Wow.
And they danced around me.
Did you cry?
For the 10 hours. But these were tears of joy.
Absolutely. And it's been amazing, Moshe, has it not been, the transcendence of the Jewish people post-Shoah?
Right.
And of course, we talk about the state of Israel. It's not only the state of Israel.
But
It's
I'll
the
tell you,
Jewish people.
the fact that I arrived in Israel and I was a member of the Haganah and I fought in the War of Liberation, that gave me back my confidence. That made me a very proud Jew. And that made me see that the Jewish people will live forever, because such spirit is not found anyplace else.
It has been an honor to meet you, to hear your
Likewise.
story. No, an honor. You're a very, very special man. We have to meet often.
Thank you.
I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha. I wish you long life, you and your children and your grandchildren. You're a wonderful Saba. Saba means grandfather.
Right.
You're a wonderful Saba to all of them.
Thank you.
And you are an inspiration to us. And I love you very, very much.
Thank you.
Mazal tov to you.